morning mist clung to the ancient forest like a whispered secret, threading between towering pines and moss-covered stones that had stood sentinel for centuries. Emma pulled her white cotton dress closer around her growing belly as she walked the familiar path through the woods behind her cottage. The fabric flowed gently with each step, catching the filtered sunlight that danced through the canopy above. These morning walks had become her ritual over the past few months. A time to think, to breathe, to come to terms with the changes happening to her body and her life. The baby inside her seemed to respond to the peaceful rhythm of the forest, settling into calm stillness whenever she ventured among the trees. Emma paused beside a cluster of weathered stone ruins, remnants of some long-forgotten structure that nature had slowly begun to reclaim. Wildflowers grew between the cracked foundations, and ivy wound its way up the remaining walls like green lace. She often stopped here, finding something comforting about the way the old stones had found peace with their surroundings. As she rested her hand on her rounded belly, Emma couldn't help but think about how much her life had changed. Just 8 months ago, she had been living a quiet, predictable existence in the small mountain town of Silverbrook. She worked at the local library, tended her small garden, and spent her evenings reading by the fireplace. It was a simple life, but it had been hers. Then Lucas had arrived in town. Even now, thinking about their first meeting made her heart skip a beat. She had been closing the library late one evening when she noticed a figure standing across the street, perfectly still in the shadows between the old streetlights. There had been something magnetic about his presence, something that drew her attention even though every instinct told her to hurry inside and lock the door. When he finally stepped into the light, Emma had felt her breath catch. Lucas was tall and imposing, with dark hair and intense gray eyes that seemed to see right through her. He carried himself with a quiet confidence that spoke of strength and authority. Yet when he spoke, his voice was gentle. "I'm looking for someone," he had said simply. "I think it might be you." Those words should have frightened her. A strange man appearing in her small town, claiming to be looking for her specifically. Instead, Emma had felt an inexplicable pull toward him, as if some invisible thread connected them across the empty street. Over the following weeks, Lucas had become a constant presence in her life. He would appear at the library just before closing time, walking her home through the quiet streets. They would talk about books, about the history of the town, about everything and nothing. Emma found herself sharing thoughts and dreams she had never voiced aloud. While Lucas listened with an attention that made her feel truly heard for the first time in years, there had always been something different about Lucas, something she couldn't quite identify. The way animals seemed to either flee from him or regard him with unusual respect, the way his eyes would sometimes flash in the darkness, reflecting light like those of a wild creature, the way he moved with predatory grace, silent and purposeful. But Emma had pushed those observations aside, lost in the intoxicating feeling of being desired, of being chosen by someone so compelling. Their relationship had progressed with an intensity that both thrilled and overwhelmed her. Lucas was passionate, protective, and utterly devoted. When he held her, Emma felt safer than she ever had in her life. When he looked at her, she felt beautiful and cherished. When he whispered that she belonged to him, that they were meant to be together, she believed him completely. The night everything changed was burned into her memory with perfect clarity. They had been in her cottage, a fire crackling in the hearth, rain pattering against the windows. Lucas had been unusually tense all evening, pacing like a caged animal. When Emma asked what was wrong, he had turned to her with eyes that glowed amber in the firelight. "There are things about me you need to know," he had said, his voice rougher than usual. "Things I should have told you from the beginning." Emma had felt a chill run down her spine, but she had nodded for him to continue. "I'm not entirely human, Emma. My kind. We're called werewolves, shapeshifters. We live by different rules than ordinary people." The words should have sounded insane. Emma should have laughed or asked if he was feeling well or backed away in fear. Instead, she found herself thinking of all the small signs she had noticed and ignored. The pieces of a puzzle she hadn't realized she was solving suddenly clicked into place. "Show me," she had whispered. Lucas had looked at her for a long moment, searching her face. Then slowly, deliberately, he had begun to change. His form had shifted and flowed, bones extending, muscles reshaping until a magnificent wolf stood where the man had been. His fur was dark gray, almost black, and his eyes remained that same intense amber. He was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. When he changed back, Emma had reached out to touch his face with trembling fingers. "You're not afraid," he had observed. Wonder in his voice. "I should be," Emma had admitted. "But I'm not. I don't understand it, but I'm not." That was when Lucas had explained about mates, about the deep mystical bond that existed between certain werewolves and their chosen partners, about how he had traveled hundreds of miles following an instinct he couldn't explain, searching for the one person who would complete him, about how he had known the moment he saw her that she was his omega, his perfect match. "You can't escape this bond," he had told her, his voice low and intense, "just as I can't escape my need for you. We're connected now, Emma, forever." The word forever had sent a thrill through her even as it terrified her. Emma had always been cautious, always planned carefully for the future. The idea of diving headfirst into something so overwhelming and permanent went against everything she thought she knew about herself. But when Lucas had kissed her that night, all her careful reservations had melted away. When he had held her close and whispered promises against her hair, she had believed every word. When passion had overtaken them both, she had given herself to him completely, trusting in the bond he described. Now, 3 months later, she was carrying his child. Emma's hand moved in slow circles over her belly as she remembered the morning she had discovered her pregnancy, the mix of joy and terror, wonder and overwhelming responsibility. She had called Lucas immediately, her voice shaking as she told him the news. His response had been everything she could have hoped for, pure, unrestrained happiness. He had swept her up in his arms, spinning her around the kitchen while laughing with delight. "Our pup," he had whispered reverently, placing his large hands over her still flat stomach. "Our beautiful pup." The possessive way he said it had sent warmth flooding through her chest. Our pup, their child. A family. But as the weeks passed and her body began to change, Emma had found herself grappling with fears she hadn't anticipated. What would their child be like? Would the baby inherit Lucas's werewolf nature? What kind of world was she bringing a child into? Lucas had been endlessly patient with her questions and concerns. He had explained that their child would indeed be a werewolf, able to shift between human and wolf form. He had described the pack community that would welcome their baby, the extended family of werewolves who would help raise and protect the child. "Our pup will never be alone," he had assured her. "They'll be part of something bigger than themselves. They'll have strength and purpose and a family that spans generations." Emma wanted to feel comforted by these promises, but sometimes the weight of it all felt crushing. She had gone from quiet librarian to werewolf mate, to expectant mother in the span of just a few months. Some mornings she woke up and hardly recognized her own life. That was why these walks in the forest had become so important. Here, among the ancient trees and weathered stones, she could find peace. She could think clearly and remember why she had chosen this path. A soft sound in the underbrush caught her attention, and Emma looked up to see a familiar figure emerging from between the trees. Lucas moved with his characteristic silent grace, his dark clothing allowing him to blend seamlessly with the shadows of the forest. But Emma's eyes found him immediately, drawn by the invisible thread that seemed to connect them wherever they were. "I thought I might find you here," he said softly, approaching her with careful, measured steps. Even after all these months, he was always careful not to startle her, aware of his own imposing presence. "The baby was restless this morning," Emma explained, settling back against one of the stone walls. "The walking helps," Lucas nodded, understanding immediately. He had become incredibly attuned to both her needs and the subtle signals from their unborn child. Sometimes Emma wondered if he could sense the baby's presence even more clearly than she could. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward her belly. Emma smiled and took his hand, guiding it to where she had been feeling the strongest movements. Almost immediately, as if responding to its father's presence, the baby shifted and settled. Lucas's face lit up with wonder, the same expression he got every time he felt their child move. "Strong," he murmured approvingly. "Alert, they know their papa is here." "How can you be so certain about everything?" Emma asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. "About us, about the baby, about our future. Doesn't any of this scare you?" Lucas was quiet for a moment, his hand still resting protectively over her belly. When he looked up, his gray eyes were serious but warm. "Of course it scares me," he admitted. "I'm going to be responsible for keeping both of you safe, for teaching our child what it means to be part of our world, for making sure you're both happy and protected for the rest of your lives. That's terrifying. Emma felt some of the tension in her shoulders ease. It was reassuring to know that Lucas had doubts too, that this overwhelming responsibility wasn't something he took lightly. But, he continued, I've never been more certain about anything in my life than I am about us, about this family we're creating. The bond between us isn't just some mystical werewolf magic, Emma. It's real. It's the way you make me laugh when I'm taking myself too seriously. It's how you challenge me to be better than I thought I could be. It's the way you trusted me enough to build a life together, even when everything about it was strange and new. Emma felt tears prick at her eyes. These were the moments that reminded her why she had chosen this path, why she had been willing to leap into the unknown with Lucas by her side. I love watching you become a mother, Lucas continued, his voice growing softer. The way you talk to our pup even though they're not born yet. The way you research everything about pregnancy and child development, filling notebooks with plans and ideas. The way you're already so protective and nurturing. You're going to be an amazing mother, Emma. We're going to be amazing parents, she corrected gently, covering his hand with both of hers. Lucas smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. Yes, we are. As if summoned by their conversation, the baby chose that moment to deliver a particularly strong kick. Both Emma and Lucas laughed, the sound echoing softly through the misty forest. I think someone wants to join the conversation, Emma said, rubbing the spot where tiny feet were making their presence known. Soon, Lucas promised, speaking directly to her belly. Just a few more weeks, little one. We can't wait to meet you. Emma closed her eyes and let herself fully absorb the moment. The peace of the ancient forest surrounding them, the solid warmth of Lucas beside her, the active life growing inside her, the promise of a future that was uncertain but filled with love. When she opened her eyes, she found Lucas watching her with an expression of such tender devotion that it took her breath away. No regrets? He asked quietly. Emma considered the question seriously. Her old life had been safe and predictable. This new life was complex and sometimes overwhelming. She was about to become a mother to a werewolf child, part of a community she was still learning to understand. There would be challenges ahead that she couldn't even imagine. But as she sat there in the morning mist, surrounded by the timeless beauty of the forest, with Lucas's strong hand protective over their child, Emma knew her answer. No regrets, she said firmly. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Lucas leaned forward and kissed her forehead, a gesture so gentle and reverent that Emma felt her heart overflow with love. Then let's go home, he said, helping her to her feet. Our family is waiting for us. As they walked back through the forest together, Emma felt a deep sense of rightness settle over her. The path ahead might be uncertain, but she wouldn't be walking it alone. She had Lucas, she had their child, and soon she would have the extended pack family that Lucas had described with such warmth. The morning mist was beginning to lift, and golden sunlight filtered through the trees to light their way home. Behind them, the ancient stones stood silent and eternal, witness to another love story beginning among their weathered walls. Emma smiled and quickened her pace, suddenly eager to return to their cottage. There were nursery preparations to finish, names to discuss, and a future to plan. Their child would be born into a world full of love and protection, surrounded by family who would cherish them always. It was more than enough. It was everything.